Bar for bar soundtrack reviews. Griselda and BSF gang conflicted. Conflicted is the first film from Griselda and BSF and follows Hunter, who was recently released from prison. Hunter vowed to never return to the life that put him in and does his best to go straight. However, due to unforeseen circumstances, he finds himself returning to that life, leaving him conflicted. The soundtrack for this film includes features from Benny the Butcher, Westside Gunn, Armani Caesar, Flea Lord, El Camino, Smoke DZA, and way more. And it's really meant to take you through the film, I feel. In fact, listening to this project alone can give you a pretty decent idea of how the film goes, since there's a couple of skits that are taken directly from the first trailer. The album/soundtrack comes in at a total runtime of 45 minutes with 15 tracks, so it is a little bit longer. However, we should keep in mind that with soundtracks, they don't typically use every song for the entirety of the song. So with the film, there's going to be kind of cuts in terms of music. The soundtrack starts off with an intro, which has the protagonist, Hunter, speaking to Benny the Butcher's character. In this intro, Benny asks what's going on with Hunter because ever since he came back, he's been acting different. To which Hunter reveals that he's been having trouble sleeping because he keeps dreaming about the time that he caught a body. He only gives this information because he sees Benny going down the same path and wants to teach him, only to find out that Benny may already have been down that path. As an intro to the album, it's pretty good and definitely grabbed my attention. I would say this intro gave a little bit too much information though, but then again, most of the snippet is from the trailer for the movie, so that's fine, I guess. This then goes into the first song proper, Mobbin', which features Chase Fetty, Heem, Bill V, and Benny the Butcher. This track feels like it would be placed early in the film, possibly in the setup to the main storyline. The beat is pretty solid and menacing, but probably what you would expect, to be completely honest. In terms of placement in the movie though, it'd be much better because they're more than likely just going to play a portion of the track like I alluded to earlier, and it's probably going to be Benny's part, which was really the highlight here. Next we have Element of Surprise from Lloyd Banks. This is definitely a standout track as it's the first solo track on this tape. I could see this track being used as a follow-up to Mobbin' once they've begun going through some of the setup, potentially at the point at which Hunter gets arrested before the events of the movie start to fully take place. This track starts off sounding like it's a reflection piece on how people are treating him, even though he's been providing for others and he's proven himself as a reliable person. There's a line early on in the track that goes, "How you gonna threaten me with real events? I left already," which makes it sound like he's really tying it into the movie. Like, Hunter wants to leave. But I could totally see this being just a thing that happened to Banks himself. The overall idea of this track is to be aware of your surroundings so you don't let your enemy have the element of surprise. Ain't Hit Nobody features Flea Lord, Ito, and Westside Gunn. Originally, I was going to say that this song could be used during the sentencing or once Hunter's in jail, but Flea Lord starts off immediately by saying this is music for the brick buyers. That alone could make it be about stuff that's happening outside that got Hunter caught up in the first place. It also made it feel like I'm not the target audience because I don't buy bricks. The overall feel of the track, from the beat at least, is pretty calm. The rhymes are solid, but similar to Mobbin', the beat and overall sound gets a little repetitive. At least having Westside Gunn on the track brings in a different voice, which really helps you stay listening to the song. The beat's not particularly bad, I'm just not a huge fan of it. The title of the song really comes into play with Westside Gunn's verse as well, basically getting at the idea that there are people who will just spray shots and not actually hit anyone. Almost saying that it's a waste or you're doing too much and you'll get caught up for it. It's hard to say what part of the track would be incorporated into the movie, but I'm leaning more towards Gunn's verse if they actually want people to hear and pay attention to what's being said, since his voice is pretty distinct. However, again, if it's meant to be just backing music, any part of the track would work. Another standout track on this project is Pride from Ransom. Ransom has been on a rampage all last year with multiple hard releases, so when I saw that he'd be featured on here, I was definitely excited. In terms of placement in the movie, I'm not too sure though. It might fit in once Hunter resolves to go straight, or just when he was about to come home. I don't know. This track is super braggadocious, and I can definitely see it just being performed as a freestyle in the movie, at least if that's what they're going for. The beat is a little more interesting than the previous ones, but I kept waiting for a drop to come in. It's like it kept building up, but never delivered it. This song is cool though, and Ransom rapped his ass off for sure. The next track is Welcome Home Dmx, featuring Dave East and Jonesy. I was actually surprised to see Dave on here. I'm not too sure why, but it turned out pretty good. Plus it's produced by the late DJ Shay, which only adds to how good this track is. I love the sample that was used here. Based on the name of the track alone, it could be used once Hunter returns home and everyone's just greeting him and congratulating him on his return. However, based on Dave's verse, it could also be assumed that Hunter isn't fully participating in the welcome because he's still in his own head about all the events that locked him up in the first place. Jonesy's verse is pretty solid too, and as it's my first time listening to him, I'm impressed. Going back to the production, it's kind of interesting to see that there's a song that sounds as good as this alongside the other meh tracks. But that's just my opinion though. Squad features El Camino, Rick Hyde, and Smoke DZA. This track is also really good, just like Welcome Home DMX, mostly thanks to, yet again, DJ Shay. This track has each artist talking about people who have lost their lives to the streets, but also celebrates them and the street life to an extent. It also touches on the idea of riding for your squad, which is a thing that most people do, I feel, like no matter what their situation. I can see this track being placed right before the catalyst that sets Hunter back into the street life, because although the beat sounds a little triumphant, the subject matter isn't quite that. This solid section of the soundtrack continues with the track 330 in Houston from Benny the Butcher, and this track is very much in reference to a recent event that occurred to Benny back in November, I believe. He was in Houston and was shot in the leg. However, they didn't take any of his money or his jewelry, so Benny and others assumed that it was an attempt on his life. It's honestly a really dope track, and Benny just flows all over the beat. I mean, this just goes to show that the best music comes from real life events. In terms of the movie, I feel that this could be placed around the first climax where we really start to get into what the movie's about, but it could also just be almost anywhere because the beat is pretty chill. The final track in this dope section is Voices from Heem, Boldy James, and Chase Fetty. I really enjoy the song again because of its production, and guess who? It's from DJ Shay, yet again. I really like it because the beat plays into the Voices title pretty well. It's almost like there are multiple voices talking at the same time, and it's super trippy. This song could definitely be placed right as Hunter is trying to decide on what to do, because there's so many voices in his head that are telling him to do different things. It's just so well done and produced. Upon my first listen of this, I actually accidentally had the album on shuffle, and this was the first song to come up, and I was just blown away. Rank from YN Billy is an interesting track simply because it's got such a different feel compared to the rest of the project. I don't particularly care for this song, and I feel that if I were looking at this as an album, I'd criticize it more because it's not great. I understand why a track like this would be included, because in terms of a soundtrack, it makes sense and it'd be thrown in just as things were about to pop off, most likely. But if I were to listen to this as an album, like I mentioned, it would be by far the worst and could potentially ruin an album. But again, just my opinion. The next song on this tape is Nerve of You from Armani Caesar. I'm not too sure where this would be placed, since it feels like a follow-up to the skit I'm Not the Enemy, where Hunter was talking to a woman that he was involved with before he got locked up. But the song itself is just, talking about the nerve of some people, and it makes this feel like it's from a woman's perspective specifically. And, I mean, that's probably due to Armani being the person rapping here. It's a dope track, though, especially considering that it's only just over a minute and a half long. Like, it's a minute 39 seconds. Like, she made good use of that short time. Conflicted comes from Flea Lord. This track could possibly be placed towards the end of the movie as things begin to wrap up. Maybe just after the climax or right before it. The track doesn't really play into the title of Conflicted as much as I thought it originally would have, but it talks about the street life and kind of glorifies it. It really does play into the idea of the movie, though, I feel. If this is meant to be put later on in the film, it does a good job of wrapping things up and making it seem like everything's all good now. Speaking of wrapping things up, the soundtrack wraps up, or begins to wrap up at least, with Mission Accomplished featuring Westside Gunn, Armani Caesar, and Benny the Butcher. And I'm assuming that this is meant to be the last track on the album proper, since it ends with a Griselda tag, and because the title makes it seem like everything's done. However, the beat makes it sound like it's a little more menacing, then, you know, kind of like everything's all good and done. Like everything's good. We're done. Like it's not that type of song. At least it doesn't feel like it. I don't really have much to say about it though. But Benny brought the heat as expected, which is probably just because he had an interlude right before his verse. So there's a little bit more build up. But the verses that we got from Wes and Armani Caesar were pretty dope too. And then the album ends with the track The Hurt Business featuring Westside Gunn, Smoke DZA, and Wale. And like I kind of alluded to, this could also be a bonus song, but I could definitely see it fitting in at the end of the movie, probably during the credits actually. I do enjoy the song and did a proper breakdown for it last week, so check that out if you want to get a more in-depth analysis. But it really does sound like it's just kind of recapping all the events of the film, except for Wale's verse, which really just felt like it was just Wale talking about Wale. Overall, the soundtrack was solid. There wasn't a whole lot that I expected from it, and I actually lowered my expectations significantly because it is a soundtrack. With that said, a lot of these songs are just okay. However, keep in mind that with soundtracks for movies, they don't always use the entire song. So you can get a particular part of the song included in the film, which usually adds to the scene, but not the entire song because that'd be a bit much most of the time. As a soundtrack, I can see where they're going and I understand the song and beat selections. As an album, however, most people probably won't care for it. My favorite tracks are Voices, 3:30 in Houston, Welcome Home DMX, Squad, and Pride. I look forward to checking out the movie and seeing if my predictions of song placements was right or if I was just way off. I do appreciate the idea of having more hip-hop focused soundtracks / albums to movies that we've been seeing more recently. It's a nice change of pace for sure, but the bar had been set pretty high with the Black Panther soundtrack. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of the soundtrack, what your favorite tracks are, and if you're willing to spend the $25 to watch the movie. Also, like and subscribe if you want to see more content and reviews like this one. Thank you for watching, and please stay safe out there.